Hello, everyone. It's Howard Gearhauser on the line. You have my dad, Dr. Richard Gearhauser. In today's video episode, we are going to talk about heart disease. So heart disease has been the leading cause of death in the United States for quite some time, and we have made some improvement in terms of minimizing heart attacks. However, heart disease is still very prevalent, and it's something that you should be thinking about in terms of what can you do to prevent heart disease and prevent a heart attack. My dad, I think it was about 10 years ago now, had his own heart issue while he was hiking in the Grand Canyon. So this is a topic that hits specifically close to home for me, and I know for him and our family as well. So it's a good topic, and hopefully you'll walk away with some really good information on what you can do to either prevent heart disease or potentially even reverse heart disease if you have it. So Dad, can you give us a little bit of background on heart disease? What's going on? Why is this such a significant killer in the United States still?
All right. Well, the latest statistics tell us that over 600,000 people die of a heart problem every year. So it's definitely the leading cause of death. And a big part of that, a little more than half, is heart attacks. And so we're going to focus more on that side of it today, although, what we talk about applies to every kind of heart disease, but there's, many different kinds. But heart attacks are kind of especially important. They've affected my life dramatically. And the reason that it impacts people's lives so much is this isn't always an end of life thing, like you're 90 years old and you have a heart attack. Well, when you're 90 years old, people are kind of expecting you to die. So it's not a shock to the family or a shock, you're typically not still working. So, the family's not going to go to the poorhouse if the male of the family has a heart attack and dies and he's 52 years old. That's a big difference. But 2 out of 10 of heart attacks that lead to, and it leads often to sudden death. A heart attack is when the blood clots in the coronary artery, the artery that feeds the heart muscle, clots in the coronary artery, and then your heart goes into a bad rhythm that doesn't pump the blood. So you've got about 4 minutes or so before you don't get enough oxygen to your brain or to your heart. And so part of the heart muscle dies, the brain dies, and you die. And it happens suddenly. And before that day that heart attack happened, you thought you were healthy. My neighbor, a good friend, a fellow physician, and he, I was talking to him and he was just so excited about life, so excited about things coming up in his life and his kids and all these different things. And then a week later, I hear that he had a heart attack and died. So that is a huge disruption to him and his family and to his friends and his neighbors. So these deaths, when they're completely unexpected, you think you're healthy. That's one of the tragedies of this. So mainstream medicine has, as Howard mentioned, has made some progress. There are a few heart attacks, and I believe that's because of the high heart attack deaths. That's because of the high-tech interventions that are available now. If you have a heart attack in the hospital, which some people do, they have a heart attack in the hospital. A hospital is a stressful place, and you're being treated for something else, but then you have a heart attack. Or if people are brought to the hospital very quickly, the doctors have this technical expertise that they can open that artery back up and they can take a defibrillator and shock your heart back into a rhythm. So if they catch you in time, they're very likely to save you. Trouble is, if you're at home by yourself or you're taking a walk in the park, no one's going to get to you in that 4-minute span. So, that's why there's so many deaths unexpectedly in relatively younger people. 2 out of 10 of the deaths occur in people under the age of 65. So, and we hear about it happening earlier and earlier. We hear about it And of course, I'm a physician, so I hear about it more. But in the 30s, in the 40s, 50s is kind of a prime time when a lot of the heart attacks occur. And you usually, when you're in your 50s, don't want to die yet.
Right. And like you said, for a lot of these individuals, it's not even like they had a whole bunch of symptoms before they just collapse and end up dying. For you, when you were hiking in the Grand Canyon and collapsed on the trail, were you experiencing any symptoms prior to that incident?
Unfortunately, I have to admit that I was. So, and I was, typical um, physician that's been programmed by the matrix. And we talk about all the different tentacles of the matrix has in society. We talk about that a lot, and we'll be talking about that a lot, a lot in the future, because this is part of our problem. Is we have this matrix which you're following the program of the matrix. And so that's what I was doing. So the chest pain, I wrote it off to, my rib is sprained, or, whatever. You make up excuses, even though deep down, well, this could be heart disease. And me being so anti mainstream medicine, which is not necessarily good, and I learned my lesson about that. Having mainstream medicine completely saved my life. So I'm not against mainstream medicine anymore, but I'm against the matrix. I'm against not being aware of all the underlying currents that are out there. So, I had my chest pain episode, my heart attack, and, thank God um, I made it through.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not the case for a lot of people. Like you mentioned, 2 out of 10 are under the age of 65, and a lot of these are ending in death. Mortality happens with that very first heart attack in a lot of these cases. So let's get into what can we do? Okay, none of us want to just drop dead from a heart attack. What can we do so we're proactive about preventing a heart attack?
Okay, well, I'll go back just a second to the did you have any symptoms beforehand, and say that most of the time, the first symptom is sudden, or not most of the time, but a large percentage of the time, the first symptom that you have problems with your coronary arteries is sudden death. So that's why heart disease, one of the reasons why it kills so many people, is we don't know. If we knew, we might like move next door to the hospital and get an apartment right there so that those cardiologists can come over and zap our heart and put those catheters in there and balloon those arteries back open, or maybe even slice that puppy out of there and put a nicer one in. You know, if you knew you had the disease, you might do that. But unfortunately, the paradigm, treats with drugs typically, besides electrocuting your heart and besides cutting it out and putting a new one in. They use drugs, and the drugs, unfortunately, are something that blocks something that happens inside of us. And it may save your life in the short term. So I'm not saying don't take any of your drugs. I'm saying some of the drugs that we use are almost totally because of the matrix. The matrix, and as an example, is the statin drugs. The statin drugs have made the matrix $1 trillion. I mean, and they came out fairly recently. So these drugs, they block an enzyme that has really important functions inside our cells. So we don't want that enzyme blocked to have optimal health. But that's the $1 trillion solution that makes the matrix much more powerful. When you add $1 trillion just from one class of drugs, that's astounding. That's thousands of yachts for executives, and all these things, and thousands upon thousands of people employed. So mainstream, has their problems. They save lives with high tech, yet they make our lives miserable by trying to profit off of drugs. So what the the basic thing that you need to do is look at nature. And so this is scientifically studied. So it's not like I'm making this up. Now, have there been thousands upon thousands of studies of this like there were with the statin drugs? No. But even though they did all those studies, the benefit of statin drugs was always, very minor, that it wasn't a huge benefit. And if you tried to take them for prevention, there was no benefit at all on mortality. So they were studied thousands of times, and that's why statins aren't used to treat everything under the sun, is because they've done a study for everything under the sun and it just doesn't work. But it does reduce the risk of a second heart attack fairly significantly, and that's why the cardiologists have bought into that's the only solution. Now, for me, I just feel like that $1 trillion is what allowed statins to be the mainstream choice. But let's get back to what you can do. So there was a recent meta-analysis or review of all the literature based on sun exposure. So sun exposure in ecological studies or observational studies, they show that people in the sun more have fewer heart attacks, okay? They also noticed that people that are in the sun more have a lower blood pressure, and blood pressure is a definite risk factor for having a heart attack. So the sun seems to be a key. Now, the first thing, of course, the mainstream scientists say, well, vitamin D, it must be vitamin D. Vitamin D reduces our heart attacks. We don't want to go in the sun because that's not good. It causes skin cancer and it'll make you wrinkled. And, we have such a high vanity reading here in the United States. God forbid I get a wrinkle from the sun. So they tell everybody and doctors, and I also did this. I put all of my patients on vitamin D supplements, say if you went back 15 years ago. Everyone got it because we all bought into, it must be the D in the sun that causes this effect. But then they did trial after trial after trial. I don't know who paid for all these trials, but they did them because vitamin D is such a huge thing and so many, on the mind of so many scientists, that they did trials. Doesn't lower blood pressure, doesn't reduce heart attacks. They did the double-blind, placebo-controlled trials that are supposedly the gold standard in medicine. They did it over and over, and it just doesn't help. So what else in the sun could help? Well, we know the sun from science, found in science, and this is something that, you do an experiment and see it happen. So it's like, yeah, that happens. And so one of the things the sun does is it causes the arterioles in our skin to release nitric oxide, which dilates them. So that does two things, is it lowers your blood pressures, and nitroglycerin also produces this nitric oxide. Well, what do they give someone who's starting to have a heart attack? They give them nitroglycerin under their tongue. So we know that nitric oxide reduces your blood pressure and can open up your coronary arteries. And the sun does this for us. Wow, totally independent of anything that vitamin D does. So it lowers blood pressure and it reduces heart attacks. Now, the other thing is there's other things in nature that in the science are suggested that it would reduce our risk of heart disease. And one of those is grounding. Although grounding, where you're barefoot on the ground and have electrical conduction to the grounding of the earth, and the surface of the earth has a negative charge, and that negative charge comes up into us and is absorbed by our cells. And one of the cells that has a negative charge on the outside is the red blood cell. And the inner lining of our arteries, the endothelium, has a positive charge, so that repels. So that is one of the things that keeps blood flowing, so that, the heart attack is where the flow stops. So electrically, we keep the blood flowing as well by these opposite charges causing the cells to repel against each other and the cells to repel from the endothelium. So that's another mechanism. Theoretically, this hasn't had a double-blind placebo-controlled trial because it's too woo-woo for mainstream medicine, but just being barefoot. Now, how else can we get these negative ions that give us this negative charge to our red blood cells? Well, one is negative ions in the air. So anytime water is ionized by slashing around either a wave crashing or a waterfall or a ripple in a river, that causes these negative ions. This is called the Lennard effect. A physicist who discovered this a long time ago discovered this. So this is also not conjecture. We breathe those in. That's like grounding yourself. So if you're at the beach and you're barefoot on the salt water, the sand, and the waves are crashing, you're getting a double dose. Do you ever feel good after you've been on the beach barefoot? I know I have. I know every single time I do it, I feel better. So here we get these negative ions from two sources that cause that mechanism I just discussed, which keeps our blood from becoming too viscous so that it stops flowing and clots. And that's the myocardial infarction, which is a blockage in the coronary artery that causes part of the heart muscle to not get enough blood. So it changes that electrical pulsing of the heart, which is very powerful, into a rhythm that has no coherence and it no longer beats and no longer pumps blood.
Exactly. And as we mentioned in a lot of our videos, just in terms of staying healthy, not just for heart related issues, but for your entire body and your mind, is to reconnect with nature. So getting out in the sun, getting electrically connected to the earth through grounding, let that water splash in your face from a wave or a waterfall. These things have very powerful effects. And there is science supporting it, but sometimes just going out and doing it, and experiencing the benefits yourself is the best way to do it. But we like to provide the science too, for those of you that might be a little skeptical about trying it. There's science supporting it, so go give it a shot. The other thing that's really interesting in terms of the new science is all that they're discovering about what the heart is capable of. I know for a long period of time, we've kind of just thought of it as a muscle that pumps blood throughout the body, but they're finding that the heart has a lot more to it. In fact, the heart has its own nervous system and has its own brain. They call it the little brain inside of the heart. And I recommend that you guys go check out Heart Math. It's this really great institute that's studying the heart and all of the different intricacies of it. I've actually been working with a coach from Heart Math, and I'm just blown away with how much there is to the heart. The other big thing is that the heart creates an electromagnetic field that's about the size of a small car around you. Okay, and this is extremely powerful. So when we think about taking statin drugs or having an operation on the heart itself, we have to think about that there might be more to the heart than just an organ in our body that we can just easily remove or tamper with. This is, something that's extremely powerful. So you want to protect it. You want to keep your heart healthy. You want to be aware of the emotions that your heart can create. And there's so much to this. So again, go check out the Heart Math Institute. They have a lot of information about everything that's going on within the new discoveries within the heart. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think, scientists have known the heart produces this electromagnetic field that can be picked up several feet away from the body. And so this is real, but we also know that the sunlight is also an electromagnetic field that wirelessly is programming us with information, the different frequencies. I mentioned how ultraviolet light may have a big impact on heart disease, but there's other frequencies that are theorized to have a big impact as well. And just as a quick example, the red frequencies. So the sun is 42% red and infrared, or even more. It varies during the time from sunrise to sunset. But the sun is half, if not more, red and infrared light. Well, red and infrared light is absorbed by our little engines inside our cell and also the water inside our cells. And so When the red light is absorbed by water, it builds a battery that's within us. So this battery is really important. And then cytochrome C oxidase, which is the kind of the pivot point of our respiration, how we make energy, also absorbs red light and runs way more efficiently when it's been charged up by red light. So here we can make our energy production higher by just getting adequate sun exposure. If you think of the modern human who maybe, especially at this time of year, starts work before the sun comes up and gets off after the sun comes down, we have our clients take sun breaks during the day. We kind of insist upon it. Even if it's just getting your face and eyes out in the sun, that's better than nothing. And it doesn't mean you have to do it for 3 hours. I mean, maybe that's how we'd want you to do it for disease reversal, but just 3 minutes can improve your health and can maybe be enough to prevent something that you don't want in your life.
And the other thing about just thinking about taking a baby step and doing 3 minutes is it might evolve into you doing it for an hour or 3 hours because you start to experience the benefits. It's hard to comprehend sometimes being outside that long if you're not even outside for a few minutes each day. So start small. Start feeling the benefits. Once you start doing that, it might become a new habit, and it's certainly a healthy habit to start incorporating as quickly as you can. So just go give yourself those few minutes to get out in nature and think about how you're feeling when you're doing it too. Anything you want to add before we sign off on this one?
No, that sounds good.
Great. So make sure to go check out the Quantum Possibility YouTube channel and Facebook fan page if you haven't already. We are doing a video every single day, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks.